Good evening. Thanks for joining us.
Hello, how are you?
I'm doing well. Katora, how are you?
I'm doing well, thank you.
We should have Nani. There she is. Hi, Nani. How are you?
Hi, everyone.
Hello.
Okay. We are almost there. Good evening, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us. Hi. Hi, President
Hi,
Reynolds. How are you?
I'm wonderful. How are you?
I'm doing well.
Good.
Well, so we are all here, and I just want to say good evening to everyone who's joining us for this Justice Now conversation. I am Jerica Richardson. I am the host of Justice Now, and I'm the National Urban League Senior Vice President for Equitable Justice and Strategic Initiatives. And I am joined by three amazing women, amazing leaders, amazing advocates. We have Sadiqa Reynolds, who is the president and CEO of the Louisville Urban League in Kentucky. We have Katura Heron, who is a policy strategist at the American Civil Liberties Union in Kentucky. And we have Equitable Justice and Strategic Initiatives. It's a very long title. That's the name of our division at the National Urban League. But that lets you know equity is really important to us. Nani Anyakweli, who is our Director of Criminal Justice. Thank you, ladies, so much for joining us this evening. I'd like to start out today's conversation just thinking a little bit and reflecting on Breonna Taylor. Many of you all know, many of those joining us know that Breonna would have celebrated her 28th birthday this past Saturday. And I'll tell you, as a Black woman who is looking to celebrate my very own birthday this Saturday, that it's just a painful reminder of where we are in this country and how far we really need to go. When I think about Breonna and just knowing that she had so much promise and from what we've heard and heard from the family and from Sadiqa, you especially, I know you've been really on the ground in Louisville and doing the work, that she was just a wonderful young woman whose life was just cut way too soon. And I can say that as someone that's probably a decade older than Breonna, and just thinking about all the experiences in my life, this birthday is not going to be the same for me. It is a reminder of just police violence, especially police violence with respect to Black women in this country that unfortunately does not get lifted up enough. And so, I wanted to turn the floor over to you ladies and just ask you to kind of share your thoughts on Breonna Taylor and what she has meant for this movement. And then I'd also really just want to kind of hear your thoughts when we're talking about police violence. And we hear about stories like Breonna Taylor's and Atatiana Jefferson and Sandra Bland and so many others. What does that say about the state of affairs for when it comes to police violence with African American and Black women in this country? Is pursuing justice just different? Are we seeing the same type of advocacy around these Black women as we've seen in other tragedies involving men? So, Sadiqa, I know that was a very long question, but I just wanted to set the stage for where we are today, and want to let us turn the floor over to you and kind of let us know your thoughts.
Oh, thanks, Jerica. I appreciate that, and I'm really glad to be here, especially with my friend Katura from here in Louisville. Can you all hear me? Okay.
We can.
Okay, good, very good. So, I think that the world is beginning to shift, and we are beginning to push harder as it relates to Black women losing their lives to police brutality. I think we haven't really seen the same energy when we had female victims. And I think Breonna Taylor was, and I think Sandra Bland really began to change that narrative. But when I think about it, I think it is because historically we've seen that level of violence really towards our men. I remember hearing stories about and reading about slavery, and when you would get that knock on the door, and as the woman, as the mother of a son and of a daughter, you know, the mother would choose to send the daughter to answer the door in the middle of the night versus the son. Not because she didn't love her daughter, but because the daughter would only be raped, but the son might be murdered. And so we have been making these really tough choices. We've really been made to feel like those were the options that we had, rape or murder. And so then there's this flipping of the script where you see even women, our girls are being murdered at the hands of police. And so I think the world has, and it was always happening, right? But it's just, I'm saying what we have been highlighting. So I think Breonna Taylor, especially, has changed the narrative. Never again will another Black woman go lose her life and go unnoticed in this country. I think that, honestly, organizations like Until Freedom coming into the city and working with us and bringing that national attention. Some people didn't love it. I understand that. But at the end of the day, they brought the national attention that we needed to really ensure that this entire world was saying Breonna Taylor's name. And I think it was a first time. I mean, Sandra Bland started it, but I think we saw something different with Breonna Taylor. Now, I pray that we don't lose another and we don't have to test the theory, right? I hope that we never have to. But unfortunately, the data shows that it's probably likely that we will see another.
Thank you for that, Sadiqa. Katura, just kind of expanding on what Sadiqa mentioned, say her name. It's a hashtag. It's something that really brought attention to Breonna Taylor's murder, quite frankly, for lack of a better term, and so many other tragedies involving Black women at the hands of police violence. What does Say Her Name mean to you? What does this movement symbolize?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing is that what that means to me is remembering our Black women. We have heard over and over again what Malcolm X said, and he said that the Black woman was the most disrespected person in America. And I think that when I hear the hashtag Say Her Name, it's meaning lifting up our Black women, whether it's someone who has been murdered at the hands of police, or recognizing the Black women for the work that we've done throughout history of keeping our nation going. And as Sadiqa said, Black women, we have had to make hard decisions. We have had to carry the weight of not only our individual families, but our communities and the nation on our back. And we're supposed to still do that while smiling and doing that with dignity and respect. And so I think that Say Her Name means don't forget us. Don't forget not only the women who we've lost, but the women who are still here fighting, for justice.
I think that's really powerful. One of our viewers said in the chat that the very same officers came to her home. So I can only imagine what that is like to have seen a story like this on TV and to have had the same officers come to your home, but for the grace of God, it could have happened to any of us. Nani, you're really joining the National Urban League along with myself and Alex Rias at a really interesting and critical time in our nation's history, where finally policing and police accountability is at the forefront of everyone's mind. As a Black woman working in the nonprofit and the advocacy space, focusing on criminal justice issues, can you talk about what that experience has been like for you and why you rose to the challenge and really pursued a position like this in 2020?
Yeah, thank you for that, Jerica. And, you know, when hearing about Breonna Taylor and her case, you know, I thought of myself and I think of my friends. I have friends who were out on the front lines in COVID, just like Breonna Taylor. And, you know, seeing her Twitter handle, Pretty and Paid, and hearing about her goals and seeing her perfect outfits, she just reminded me of, not at myself because I don't have perfect outfits, but she reminded me of my friends and people in my life. And, you know, it's so beautiful, but also so painful because in today's age, we have a chance to really know who the people who the police killed were. You know, we got to see Breonna's thoughts on Twitter that she was ready to have a family and, you know, she was debt free. And, you know, those are all things that women my age are experiencing right now. We're thinking about our future. And to, you know, to hear what happened to her and to know that, you know, we're not safe in our homes. Like, you know, she was blamed for who she was dating. All the rhetoric that happened after was just was such gendered racism that continues to happen all the time. And so to your question of, you know, what is it like to be in this space? It feels, you know, like my calling. I see myself in Breonna Taylor. I see people in my life in Breonna Taylor, and she was just a normal person trying to, you know, survive and make it to having kids, having a life, and, you know, being more independent. And, you know, working in this space, it feels like the only place to be, especially as an attorney, as somebody with a legal background, to use my education and my training to advocate for the lives of Black people and specifically Black women.
And can I say something about what you just said that I think is so powerful? This idea that she was just a normal person. They have really made attempts to demonize Breonna because of her past relationships. And they don't understand, they meaning the powerful, the privileged, the police, don't understand that past relationship with that bad guy, that humanizes her to us. Because I don't care how many degrees Black women have, we all have made choices that our mothers wish we hadn't made. We all have been in relationships. We all have loved somebody that maybe wasn't the best choice for the rest of your life, but but is in that moment, or, you know, so you meet people where they are. And so this idea that they really wanted her to be this person who we did not find worthy of mourning, that we did not find worthy of protesting for. And so there was a real shock to the system of America when we said, you cannot turn us against our sister. You can tell us everything about her. You can open up her dirty laundry and reveal it all, and we are still going to love her. We are still going to march for her. We are still going to say that her life was worth it. Because you know why? She was just a roundaway girl. She was just a regular girl, like all of us, you know? And so that was I appreciate you saying she was just normal.
Yeah. That really resonates with me because so often Black people in this country are just not seen in the same light as everybody else. We're not seen as human beings. And that's who Breonna Taylor was. But I will also say, just from the perspective of Black women, she was a frontline worker. Breonna was focused and invested on helping her community. And like so many Black women in this country, you can look at any profession, we show up for other people. And so, you know, I just think it was so powerful when we really saw the explosion of this movement, and we saw so many of our entertainers and everyday people and advocates like Tamika Mallory and others just really showing up for Breonna because she showed up for so many of us. And I think that speaks to her character. And it is shameful that there is always this pattern of victim blaming when it comes to those who's lost their lives at the hands of police violence. And so there is so much that we need to do, and we have to do a lot more. But I just want to give all of our viewers here kind of an update on what's happening. Sadiqa, can you talk about, it's over a year since Breonna was murdered in her home. Can you kind of tell us what the mood is like on the ground, where her case stands, what's happening in Louisville that you can share with this group?
So the civil case against the police department has been settled. It is the largest settlement agreement ever reached in the police killing of a Black woman. So that happened, and it is very good. Her mother negotiated for additional first responders to go out either instead of police or with police when you have people who are, mentally ill or some other issue. And so where police don't need to be first responders. We haven't yet seen that happening in our city, but I understand that there are models being looked at. There were some demands that protesters made. We're seeing changes in some of our business community as it relates to board changes, who's represented, that kind of thing. And I think that came directly from protesters. In fact, right after the protest, I created this long list of things that had willingness to consistently raise their voices. The no-knock warrants that Keturah will talk about, the ban on no-knocks and all of that. Let me just say this about the police department. All of the officers involved, all of the officers that we know were involved in the Breonna Taylor case have left the department. So they have either been terminated or resigned. No one has been charged yet. We have one officer who was terminated for actually perjury, basically for swearing out an affidavit that was not true, which is the whole thing that set the whole thing off, that allowed a warrant even for them to go in. And then one of the officers, the officer who was shot, actually, this is unbelievable. He is actually suing Kenny, who is Breonna's boyfriend, who was there at the time. So they murdered her, and she is killed in front of the love of her life. And he is walked backwards, almost attacked with dogs, and then he is sued. So he's being sued, and that officer is also allegedly writing a book. So the feeling on the ground right now in Louisville is very, it almost feels there's a lot of hypocrite. We're not anywhere near healing, and it's complicated for me because, of course, as a community leader and the leader of our Louisville Urban League, I really want to be encouraging, and I certainly find some spaces to encourage myself and others. But at the same time, everybody across the world knows by now, right, that our Attorney General is a joke. He didn't even look at the entire case, didn't even consider whether or not the affidavit for the warrant was valid. I mean, not that he said it was or wasn't. Please understand me. There's a person lost their lives, and he didn't even take the time to look at it. So we are struggling to move forward, but without any real justice, without any ability to heal. It's very complicated. Our relationship with some of our city leaders, elected officials, is gone. So we are really in tough times right now in Louisville, Kentucky. I mean, the sun is out, not necessarily right now, but the world is sort of marching on, but it's like, to what end? When will we ever, get justice? And so last thing on that, we are still waiting for the FBI. The FBI does have the case. We're hopeful that they will be able to file civil rights charges. And then something else good, very good happened. The Department of Justice has come into Louisville because there have been so many violations alleged and they have happened. I mean, we've got stuff on video, miles and miles of video. So we think that Department of Justice could be a really, really good resource to really change policing as we know it. We're hopeful. That's all we can be, is hopeful with the tools that we have. And I think, of course, about the work that it's not for me to speak on, but for Keturah to talk about the no-knock work.
Yeah, thank you for that and for bringing us up to speed on what's happening. I do think it is positive that we have the Department of Justice and the FBI, which also sits under the Department of Justice, really taking a look at this case. But we've seen with all the protests that there has been a movement on the policy front. And Keturah, I would really love to hear from you about what the community and what advocates are really doing on the ground and have done on the ground to really push for some meaningful change.
Yes, thank you. So, obviously we were able to put a complete ban on no-knock warrants here in Louisville, Kentucky. We named that Breonna's Law. And in that law, it also says that body cameras must be worn in any type of warrant situation when a warrant is served. And the cameras must be turned on 5 minutes before they're actually executed and 5 minutes afterwards. And the other thing is that footage has to be stored up to 5 years. And so that's what we were able to do here in Louisville. And what we've seen is that we've seen folks take that piece of legislation that was done here, and we did that in 17 days. I think that's what's important as well, is the pressure that the community put on our local elected officials, that from the time that we launched the campaign and from the time that they signed that bill in, it was 17 days that we were able to do that. Since then, we were able to get a version of that at the state level. We did not get a complete ban at the state level here in Kentucky, but we were able to pass Senate Bill 4, which does make some changes to no-knock warrants. It makes it more difficult. Sadiqa talked about earlier the warrant process. So Senate Bill 4 goes deep into them just even getting the warrant. And I believe that with that bill, the things that the police officers have to go through, I deeply believe that Breonna Taylor would still be alive if even that variation was here. And we've seen it across the nation. We've seen different communities ban no-knock warrants across the nation in different states. And obviously nationwide in the bill, the George Floyd Police and Justice Act, we see that there is a call to ban no-knock warrants nationwide. And I think that's the big thing. And not only that piece of policy, but as Sadiqa said, we haven't, really seen a lot of that policy happen here. Sadiqa talked about the other piece of a different force who will respond to different things such as mental health. We are still working that out. We did see a civilian review board happen, but we weren't able, and we had a working group and we were able to get some things done locally, but we failed to pass that at the state level. So that's some of the work that we need to continue to see happen. And I think the overall thing is really just taking a deeper look of the role of policing in communities and redefining what safety means to communities, especially our Black communities.
Thank you for that, Keturah. One of the things that I think is really powerful and important to underscore is all the work of advocates like yourself and Sadiqa that's happening on the ground. And it's happening all over the country right now. I mean, we really have seen a movement. You mentioned the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act, which we know is still being negotiated and is sitting in the Senate right now. But I think it's critically important that we continue to push our lawmakers, to put pressure on them, and to make sure that we are advocating for a strong bill. Because otherwise, putting George Floyd's name, putting Breonna Taylor's name on it is, I think, a smack in the face of our community if it is anything less. And I think while we've been talking about the need for there to be more standardization and more policies from the national level, to impact what's happening on the state and local level. We also recognize that when you are on the ground, sometimes what legislation on the municipal and the state level sometimes will have a more profound impact on our daily lives. And so that's part of the reason the National Urban League really put forth its 21 pillars for redefining public safety and restoring community trust, because we know that trust has been broken. Nani, it would be great if you can speak to our plan and generally what the framework is. I know Sadiqa brought up mental health. We've raised a whole host of issues that go beyond the no-knock warrants, which I think are critically important. And we know there's a movement to replicate legislation that we're seeing in Kentucky and Louisville and other jurisdictions across the country. But can you speak to our focus of our 21 pillars and why we really think there is a need to move on the state and local level?
Yeah, Jerica, you're 100% correct. While we are waiting for the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act, states and cities can take their own action, just like Louisville and Kentucky is doing. And a lot of the points that you highlighted, Couture, are actually in our plan. You talked about empowering communities to re-envision public safety, and that is the first pillar in our plan. And just to back up, our plan has 21 pillars and is divided into 5 different themes. The themes are collaborate with communities to build a restorative system, change divisive policies, hold police accountable, data transparency and data collection, and changing the police from the inside with changing your hiring practices and changing training. And so what you all are doing in Louisville really covers all parts of our plan. Sadiq, you talked about the DOJ coming in. That is one of the pillars in our plan, to have impartial investigation. And sorry, my camera might have gone off, but to have impartial investigations from neutral parties, including the DOJ, and to take these kinds of cases to a special prosecutor to actually properly investigate the case, as we saw in the case of Derek Chauvin. Another pillar that's highlighted is obviously banning no-knock warrants, and that is something that is happening across the nation right now. At least states like Florida, Oregon, and Virginia have banned no-knock warrants entirely. Some states have given partial bans, and there are even proposals on the city level, as you all know. And not to ask the question, but I want to put it back to you, Katera, because I'm wondering if there's anything that you think we should be considering as some of these states pass partial bans. Is a partial ban really having the power that we think it has?
Yeah, I think that obviously we need to do a complete ban. Obviously that's what we go with, and that's what we want. However, we know and understand the landscape of politics. I was talking to someone earlier. There's 3 different pieces. You have policy, and then you have politics, and then you have the practice of what's actually happening on the ground. And what I try to tell people is to take the politics out of it and really think about the policy of what is really going to make our communities better and safer. And so when it comes to policy, for me, I'm like, it's a complete ban. But when you put the politics inside of it, you are dealing with a different type of beast. It's no longer about the policy itself. And so what I would say to that for people who are battling is that our elected officials need to be strong. Our communities need to get behind them and to continue to demand that complete ban. And if it's not a complete ban, we definitely need to ban them unless it's in those exigent circumstances, when people are in immediate danger, when there's a kidnapping, when there is a terrorist situation, or if there's an active shooter situation. No-knock warrants definitely need to be completely banned when it comes to drug raids. We know that historically that's where they started. We know historically that's where our people are hurt and harmed. And as someone here in Louisville, Tom Wine said, he's our attorney here. He said that there's no amount of drugs or drug money worth a human life, and we're talking about banning no-knock warrants, should not be politicized. It's about the preservation of human life, whether that's death or whether that's life being traumatized.
And one thing that's really important for us to point out in Breonna Taylor's case, there was never any suspicion of her having drugs in that home. There was a question, they said, about whether or not there was money there. But in most cases and I was a criminal defense attorney for many years, and I know a lot of criminal defense attorneys. People do not flush money. They might flush drugs. They don't flush money. So this was one of those cases where there never should have been a no-knock warrant ever signed in the first place. There just weren't the circumstances that required that kind of thing, period. And so even as we're talking about no-knocks, please do understand Breonna Taylor's home, regardless of whatever happens with any of these laws, girls and women and people like Breonna should not be subject to no-knock warrants.
And I would say really quick as well, is I know that one of the pillars of the 21 pillars talked about investigating police misconduct. And what we have been learning is that same group of officers, that same division, have been traumatizing the community in Louisville for years. And that is the same trend that we've seen across the nation. And so when we're talking about what we have to do, we have to dismantle these rogue police officers, these rogue police forces within, to say this is not what we're going to do anymore. And I think that's one of the things that I wanted to make sure that I highlighted as well.
And can I say something on that? Is because Couture is exactly right about that. So in Breonna's, in this case, one of the officers has hit another officer in a vehicle because he was, doing something he shouldn't have been doing, hit the officer, I think broke the officer's back. There was no discipline for more than a year, maybe 2 years. He actually was sitting on the merit board of the police department. So that means here this guy is, he has a history of having been in trouble, but was voted onto the merit board by his peers. So no consequences, no accountability, and finally we have someone who is dead. No surprise. So that portion about police accountability is tremendously important as we move forward in supporting this work being done on the national level. And I'm very thankful to the National Urban League for really leading the way in pushing for this police reform.
Well, we definitely have to push. And I think Couture hit a really important point when she talked about the politics of it all, that their political courage in this country is in short supply. And so as we work on the state and local level, and we work on the federal level, we also need to keep in mind who shows up for us. We know Breonna showed up for us, but who is going to show up for us when we are talking about really redefining public safety? We have a number of elections coming up in a lot of major cities across the country. So you need to be looking at who is your mayor, who is going to be your governor. Midterms will be here before we know it. And so I'm watching and I'm taking notes at who has been supportive of the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act, and who has been working to make sure that it is strong, and who has been working to detract from it. And so I hope everyone on this call and everyone in our communities are taking notes and taking names, because it will continue to happen if we don't have the right people in place, and the people that have the political courage to stand up even when it's not easy, when it's difficult, or when it may not be popular where they happen to be. I mean, if we are focused on democracy and equity and justice for all of us, then we need strong leaders that get it, that care, and really understand. And so I just want to say we're kind of nearing our time in this conversation. I did want to flag for those that are following us on the chat that you can text Justice Now to 52886 and really urge your senators to pass a strong George Floyd Justice and Policing Act. We are also looking at the National Urban League next week. We are going to be talking more about policy, about a lot of the issues that were raised in this very conversation. So our legislative policy conference, it's a 2-day virtual fair. It's streaming live on the National Urban League's website at nul.org. You'll be able to watch it on Twitter, as well as YouTube. And we just really want you to follow us on social media and really engage in the conference as we talk about meaningful policies that can have an impact on all of us in our entire community. So before we close, I just wanted to turn the mic back over to each one of you ladies to see if you had a few closing thoughts on Breonna, on this movement, and where we need to go from here. Nani, would you like to start?
Sure. Well, what I'd like to just do in light of how it's Pride Month, I wanted to highlight that Black transgender women are actually a population that is the most victimized by police officers in this country. And what they experience, what Black women experience generally, isn't always counted, which is the sexual assault by officers, which, you know, we don't even have numbers for right now at all, but we can imagine that it's happening. And so with my closing words, I wanted to lift up that important intersection that we often overlook ourselves.
Thank you for that, Nani. Keturah?
Yes, thank you for having me. And what I would like to lift up and encourage people is that when you see something that is wrong in your community, that it is everyday people like you and I, that you can change the policy. I tell people we came up with the campaign of no more no knock, sitting on a porch and having a cocktail and trying to figure out what we can do. And it literally came from a conversation with 3 people, and it has now became an issue that we're seeing making great impact. And so I encourage people to do that. And then I also encourage folks to consider being an elected official in your community. We have the power to make that change, and we are the leaders that we're looking for, and it's up to us to do it. And then, of course, to make sure they check out the 21 Pillars. I just now, a little bit ago, checked it out, and it is on point. And so definitely check that out to see if you can implement some of those things in your local jurisdictions.
Well, thank you for that. We definitely will have more information coming your way and to everyone out in the community around the 21 Pillars. And Nani has put together an amazing toolkit. So you can really, it's a how-to guide, and it really outlines some really important legislation that's happening across the country that you all can take and really replicate where you live. Sadiqa?
I'm really honored to be here with all of you. And I want to say we really do need more strong, Black, courageous, conscious leaders to be making policy. And so whether that is running for office or working as a policy advisors, policy drafters, policy research, we need to be in control of the policies that are impacting our communities, because we know how to make change. We're doing the work. We've got to be really in the work on the policy side. So it's really a pleasure to listen to you all. I think I'm older than everybody on here, and I just feel so hopeful about a future that makes space for women like you.
Well, thank you so much for that. And thank you all for joining me. You're right, Sadiqa. We all have a role to play. And it's important that we step up. No matter what space you're in, no matter what you do for a living, there's something that each and every one of us can do. So with that, we encourage you to join us next time. We will be meeting again at 6 p.m. on June 22nd. As Nani lifted up, it is Pride Month. So we are going to be talking about the plight of trans women, trans men, and just all of the challenges and the issues, but also the triumphs that we are seeing in the LGBTQ community. Thank you all again for joining us. And remember, the time for justice is always now. Take care.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jerica.
Thank you.